Welcome, everyone, to the Inspired Riding podcast. And I'm so thrilled to introduce you to April Schaeffer. April,
Hi,
thank you for being here with me.
thank you so much for having me.
So, as you know, I'm doing a series to help support riding instructors. And I think having you here as a body worker will really help give them support to know that it is possible to help the horses that they're working with in a really clear way, in an affordable way, especially with your online classroom. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you do with horses and how you help people with their horses?
Sure, for sure. So I came into this in 2000, late 2016, started my business in early 2017, and I've always loved caring for horses. I mean, I've always enjoyed riding when I was younger, but I always tended to really enjoy kind of the wellness perspective of all of it. So when I was looking to, fulfill my childhood dream of working with horses, I'm like, well, what do I want to do? I can do pretty much anything. And picked massage because I felt like it was such a intentional wellness avenue that I could take. Like I didn't necessarily want to go be a barn manager and clean stalls and do all of those things and taking care. But if I could make them feel better in their bodies, I felt like that would be a really cool job to have. And as I mentioned before, in my professional life outside of horses, I've been a hairdresser my whole adult life. So it kind of went hand in hand to helping people feel better about themselves. It just made sense that I would try to help animals feel better about themselves too. And in the process of that, I learned so much more about them than I thought I had known from my younger years. And so much of it came to kind of wellness and environment and how everything that a horse comes in contact with every day really does impact its overall body wellness. And I became kind of, I guess you could say, addicted to learning. So I learned about hoof care and nutrition and track living systems and how many different ways can we support the horses to have the happiest bodies possible so that we can use massage as kind of injury prevention and a body balancing support, as opposed to always using it when something was sore or when there was a particular issue that someone was having. So that is what I do in person, and I've developed a ton of, shorter and longer owners and professional level classes online to help kind of cast that education net as far as possible outside of the people that I get the opportunity to work with in person.
I love that. And I love that you focus on preventative care. That's so
Yeah,
brilliant.
yeah, yeah.
How have you shifted your way of working with horses over the years?
I think when I think about that and I go back to 9-year-old April in the late 80s that was introduced to the Western pleasure show world. So the way that I was introduced to horses was very much so like your traditional training barn, super controlled environment, not a super natural environment. Now I see that, but as a little kid, that is what was natural to me.
Right.
Um, and I think back to some of the lessons that we learned as we were learning horses. Some behavioral issues were probably tack fit. Some hoof issues were probably diet issues. Some injuries that they would get in their stalls were probably from not necessarily enjoying as much confinement as they were getting, or bored because they didn't have friends next to them or enough hay. And there's all these things. So I think the shift for me as somebody who became really aware of my own body in my 30s, I got involved in fitness and I experienced breast cancer. So when you have that kind of lesson for yourself, it helps you kind of look through that lens towards other things in your life. And at that particular time in my 30s, I had really just started to dive deep into the horses. So it just was natural for me to shift that focus of just massaging to why do they need the massage? What I want to use massage to help prevent an issue, not necessarily mask the symptoms of one. So I think that's the biggest shift is the recognizing the things that they need day to day, that sometimes the conveniences we want don't make possible for them.
That's beautiful. So are you encountering a bigger shift with the clients that you work with now as you educate them that the horses need to be out more, they need to be shifting their diet, things like that?
For sure, for sure. For those who are in an environment that allows them to make those changes, there's always going to be facilities that just run smoother on a very one size fits all model. Some of the issues that some of those horses are going to have are only going to get so much better because they are a little limited to what they can do there. You know, that's where kind of my advocating side comes in, where I say, you know, if you're okay with that and you're accepting that and this is where we're going to be, that's how we plan. But if you want things to get better, you know, there might be some changes that need to be made, and those things are hard. Change is hard. I think in general it's hard for owners, it's hard on horses, it is super hard for facility managers who are trying to manage very large number of horses and opinionated owners. And then in comes an opinionated practitioner. It's like, this needs to change and this needs to change. And sometimes that becomes a real inconvenience to them. So it really depends. I think there's not a single person that hires a body worker that doesn't want the very best for their horse, that isn't taking the very best care. They know how to take care of the animal that they're calling me out to see. I think sometimes you just only know what you know. And if you're open-minded and someone really excited to teach you something new comes along, it can open up, I think, kind of a whole new awareness for things.
I'm so glad you're doing that. And I would guess that you created your podcast to help educate more people, right?
Yes, absolutely. The podcast was something that I guess I found myself, I love to share. I love to talk about it. And, you know, I get sometimes I run out of people to talk to about it. So I figure, what's the better way to talk to anybody that wants to listen than to record myself talking or talking to other people about it and create a podcast? Because I obviously talk to all of my in-person clients. I obviously have kind of a team of wonderful, you know, like-minded professionals that I get to chat with. But, you know, when you're busy running your business, sometimes your reach can only get so far with what you have to say. So I figured, instead of spending as much time as I was free sharing on social media, what if I made this new avenue of free sharing that could be shared even further? And it's been a lot of fun. I love talking about it all.
That's brilliant. And of course, I'm biased because I love doing podcasts as well.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I'm really glad you're doing it. So, April, how do you stay inspired?
Um, I I remind myself that I'm fulfilling that childhood dream every day. I say that sometimes things happen to you that you can either, it can make you better or it can make you bitter. And I was about a year into my business when I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and having to take 6 months off to deal with all of my surgeries and whatnot. It really reminded me that life is so short. And if you have the opportunity to do what you love and do it every day, you absolutely should, because you can plan to do something later. And what happens if your later might not happen? So for me, I remind myself every time I feel overwhelmed or frustrated that it's my dream. I'm able to do so. I was able to start a second career in my late 30s and still manage to make it successful through something like breast cancer, because I just have such a strong passion for it. I think when you're doing what you really love to do and were meant to do, there's not a whole lot that can stop you from doing it if you're willing to stay really focused.
Yeah, that totally gave me chills. And I'm so glad you're here and doing
Thank
well
you.
and
Thank you.
able to find that
Yeah,
new wave of passion and inspiration. It's gorgeous.
for sure. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, April, what are some top tips that you would want to share to help elevate the horse world?
Okay. I had to ponder on these a little bit, because I never want what I have to share to feel like judgy to anybody that has been doing something the only way they know to do things. So I think if anything, these tips are something that I would have told myself before I kind of came into my new knowing. So I'm talking to myself as much as I'm talking to everybody else. And
Nice.
first and foremost, always put the horse first. Always overall, whether it is, many of my clients acquire a horse and then they have a goal with that horse. And that is like the end all be all, whatever we have to do to achieve that goal. And I find sometimes that we're looking past the fact that the horse is saying that that's not the best suited goal for them. It might be the goal we want, but we might be creating more problems trying to achieve that goal. So horse first always, horse before the sport. I love the sport world. It's job security. Sport horses are athletes. They need massage. But I think they always need to be put first. The next two are going to be, they can be owner and professional directed, but for professionals for sure, collaborate more and disagree less. I
Mm.
think that the equine world is so full of opinions and experiences and multiple ways to do the same thing that we tend to get more caught up on the piece that we don't agree with instead of learning the nuggets of knowledge we can take from the things that we might agree on. And
Yes.
I, right. And I see that, I mean, I see it within the bodywork world, but because like I've mentioned before, I've dove into the hoof world and the nutrition world and all of these different avenues where we're missing the opportunity to learn and grow because we're so stuck on this one thing that somebody does different than us, because there can be so many other things tied up in the package of what they do that could be really, really valuable. So with that, the third tip would be never stop learning and growing. If you ever get to a point where you think you've learned it all, you just hang up your hat because you're done. You're done. You're never going to continue to grow if you think you have nothing left to learn. The fourth and fifth tip are a little more towards owners. Always be your horse's biggest advocate. I think that our horses are our children that never grow up and move away. So if my 15-year-old child was in some sort of situation that wasn't beneficial to them, would I take, you can't change that as an answer? And I think that we should look at our animals that way. We make a commitment to their life. So if they're in a situation where something needs to be changed, as hard as it is to upset whatever that normal might be for you, the horse, or the people involved in whatever that change may be, it's always better to advocate as strongly as you can for your horse. Last one, if it doesn't feel right, it's probably not. Don't ignore your gut feeling. I think that we maybe just in society in general are kind of encouraged to push those gut feelings down because they may be a message that other people are uncomfortable with. And going back to being the advocate for these animals, if it doesn't feel right, it's your responsibility to change it. So the only thing that hurts when you ignore it is, potentially the horse, and then you for feeling guilty for not making the change that you wish you would have made before. So that those are the five things that I think are the biggest lessons I've learned coming back into horses in my 30s and 40s.
I love those so much. Collaboration is so key,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's the highest level of connecting with others
Yeah.
in the business,
Yeah.
and it's so much needed. And I do love that a lot of the professionals that you're working with. That's how I found you,
Mhm.
Deanna
Yeah.
and Tiffany.
Mhm.
They always say
Yeah.
team horse. I'm like, yes, that's what
Yep.
it's about. It's helping them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. For sure.
And we literally just this past weekend did a master class on advocating for yourself and for your horse.
Yeah. That's
And the
beautiful.
key, thank you. And the key really is you have to trust your intuition. And that's what my business is all about. And
Yeah.
there are moments where I could have prevented a horse from passing away if I had said something and
Yeah.
understood what I was seeing, but I didn't understand it at the time.
Yeah.
And now
Yeah.
I
Well,
think back, I'm like, oh gosh. But now I have to tell people, hey, putting these tie downs on these horses is really dangerous.
Yeah, yeah,
It's also
yeah.
not good biomechanically. So yeah.
Yeah. And I think that as professionals and as we mature as humans, women, we just get more confident in saying the uncomfortable things. Because if you, again, you have that experience where you're like, man, if I would have known and been able to recognize that, what we could have prevented. But fear is a real thing. You know, fear can make you feel like you don't know what you're talking about. I think as owners and sometimes as professionals, we get this like imposter syndrome. Like, I'm not a farrier, so I shouldn't talk about feet, or I'm not a vet, so I shouldn't talk about ulcers. And I think that it's all about how you say what you say, how you deliver the message that you have. You don't have to be an expert on everything, but you might have that tidbit of information that helps somebody make a better choice for their horses.
Yeah. So let me ask you, how do you usually bring something up in a kind and supportive way?
So I like to say I'm softly direct, right? I feel like most of the time when people have reached out to hire me for body work, they've followed me on social media enough. They say like your vibe attracts your tribe, right? So anybody who has scrolled through, the last 5 posts that I've made on my professional social media, you're going to see that I'm pretty wellness driven. Like the environment has to support the horse's goals, and the human goals with the horse. So most time, I think that some people are kind of asking me to come out to help them say the hard things or to encourage them to make some of those changes, which I love to do. So I say that I give people grace. A good example of this is when I acquired the horse that we're going to talk about in your next question. He had some really serious hoof problems. And my hoof care provider came out and on day one was like, this is what I'm going to do to help you. And this is what I need you to do to support the environment for what I'm going to do to work. And it took me about 6 months of making little bitty changes that I was comfortable enough making because it was so different than what I knew. And if she wouldn't have given me the grace of those 6 months, I wouldn't have been able to learn what I learned about that. So when I walk into a situation where it seems like there's an issue for a horse and an owner that they really don't know a ton about, that's how I approach it. Like, this is what I think the problem is, and I can do this to support the body, but you might need to do, at least one of these 3 things sooner than later to help support the environment for that. And again, they might change one thing because that's easy. And then the next month they're like, well, we're getting better. And then I'm like, well, what did you do? And they tell me the one thing. And I'm like, let's try adding this. And they're like, okay. And then 6 months down the road, whatever symptom we were dealing with at that first appointment may be gone because we removed the cause of what that was. So I always try to give people grace. Change is hard, and learning and making changes is something that I think you have to be gentle with some people about. Now there are some clients that it's like they've been waiting for someone to come tell them that, and they drink it from a hose, and they try to do all the things all at one time, and it overwhelms the horse and the facility managers and people around them. But it's just as much inspiring to me when I get somebody that's that excited about finally having somebody to come tell them, yes, all of those things probably do need to happen. We sometimes just get ahead of ourselves and how quickly we make those changes.
Yeah, it really does take quite the negotiations of feeling into what feels right to shift.
For
And
sure.
so glad you're there to support them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find that if I just say, this is what I'm noticing. What do you
Mm-hmm.
think about this? Like
Yeah.
phrases like that, can just start opening the door, especially if you're talking to maybe another professional, you don't want to step on toes. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
don't know as much about this. However, what do you think
Yeah.
about this? And then they can start talking and then maybe come to the same conclusion you're already addressing, which is kind of neat.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, for sure.
it's almost like setting the horse up for letting them think it's their idea, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It really is. It is. And like I said, I think a lot of times by the time that they've hired somebody like me, they have some of these things in mind. They kind of just needed somebody to solidify what they were saying, or they needed somebody that was willing to talk to. I always go to hooves because it's usually the easiest professional to kind of correlate with. But a lot of times, if there's a hoof issue, as an owner, we're intimidated to talk to the farrier because we don't know anything about hooves. So I will always offer, like, hey, I do suspect a little bit of that too. And I'm more than happy to talk to your hoof care provider if you think they'd be open to talking to me. And that alone usually brings so much relief to the owner to be like, oh, because I don't know what I would say. I don't know what I'm talking about. And again, not an expert, but know enough to be able to say, this is what I see with the body. How do you feel about that? And it usually starts a really cool conversation and gives me the opportunity to collaborate more, which I
Yes,
love.
brilliant. That's so good.
Yeah.
Okay, do you have a story about a favorite horse?
Sure. So the horse I was talking about earlier with the hoof problem. The first year that I was doing massage, I acquired a half-blind 15-year-old Appaloosa named Ollie.
Oh,
And it's a very long story, so I'm going to try to condense it as much as possible. But he was bought as my mom's husband's trail safe husband horse. So we traded a yearling for him. I had been looking around online for a family member that was looking for a horse, and I kept coming across his ad, and he was just, again, kid of the Western Pleasure 90s. So I'm seeing this big, long backed Appaloosa halter bred horse with this beautiful rocking horse lope. And I'm like, oh, he's really cool. And I thought he was being advertised as a trail horse. So I turned my mom to it. She fell in love with it. Long story short, we bring him home. We know that his blind eye was only partially blind. Like he could still see like he could follow your hand, but you could tell he didn't have the same depth perception. So I started to kind of investigate where these injuries came from. 15 years old, had multiple owners, but the only owner on his paper was the original breeder. So I sought out to find the breeder, and I actually wound up in a conversation with their daughter. So I find out that Ollie was bred to be a 3-year-old halter futurity horse. He was sold as such, and he was in a trailer accident either to or from a futurity as a 3-year-old, and it injured his eye, took his right front pectoral muscle, and he sustained some injuries to his his back leg. Had scars on his back leg, but nothing really up on his hind end. And it really didn't seem to put a hitch in his step. He got around pretty well considering he was missing a big chunk of the front of his chest. And he would lead the pack in a trail. He would follow, he'd ride in the middle. He was great. Winds up with an eye infection, zaps the rest of the vision out of that eye. And now all of a sudden we're swinging our head around to see everything with the good eye.
yeah.
And we're no longer husband safe. and, and he's doing all of this very unsafe behavior in the barn with people who had no experience dealing with blind horses. And my mom says, I don't know what to do. I think I need to sell him. And I'm like, well, who's going to buy a half blind 15-year-old horse without a chest muscle that, even though he was a great trail horse, at that point in time, he wouldn't walk in the trail. I could get off of him and lead him and he'd follow me all the way through the trail. But I would almost imagine that taking away that peripheral vision on this side made everything look like a one-sided tunnel. And he was just not having it.
Yeah.
So I didn't make him, and I decided that I was going to buy him because it wasn't his fault that he got this eye infection. I just became a body worker, and I was going to learn all the things that I could to help this horse. And I spent 5 years and amounts of money that I don't care to disclose trying to figure him out. So through that, we started with hoof abscesses, which later on find out was kind of a whole body inflammatory response was really coming through his feet, but that was the symptom. So that's what I was trying to deal with through the hoof issue, learned a ton about nutrition, environment, all of those things. Um, he started to present sleep deprivation signs. So he was getting like flock sores and kind of random bumps on the face. And we could tell that he wasn't laying down to sleep. Um, Fast forward a couple years, I wind up having him on a track facility where he would stay in the barn. He would put himself in the barn in the evenings under a camera. And I was watching him just flat out fall. He would just fall over. Got down every day and rolled. I would go out to the barn every single day and he rolled both sides, got up, down, had no problem. So I knew he probably wasn't laying down to sleep, but I knew it wasn't because he couldn't get up and down. There was just something that wasn't making him feel safe. By this time, the diet is as anti-inflammatory as it gets. The environment couldn't get more natural. He had a little best friend Appaloosa pony that became his little protector on the track. So he had the company of other horses. So he should have felt safe enough to lay down. Still wasn't happening. So I ultimately had images done. I thought it could be anything from a brain tumor to, just some arthritis that might have needed some injections, to give him some comfort to lay down. So over the course of about a year and a half time, we would x-ray and we would inject, see if there was a change. And then we'd x-ray more and we would just keep moving down his body. Nothing ever really gave him the relief he needed to sleep. He was still falling. The falls were getting worse. And one night he fell into a hot electric fence.
Oh gosh.
And he severed his extensor tendon. So at this point, I realized I have to find out what is causing it and if I can fix it. And if not, we have to give him the gift of a really long, restful sleep, right? So ultimately, we had x-rayed everything that an x-ray machine could find. And I got our local vet to help me ultrasound deeper up into his hind end on his right side, because I knew that that whole right side was kind of the result of that trailer accident when he was younger. And we discovered through ultrasound a completely deteriorated meniscus.
Oh.
So while it probably wasn't comfortable for him to get up and down, if he had to get up quickly from a deep sleep, it was probably really uncomfortable. And that ultimately is what we kind of pieced together that he must have been avoiding. And the deterioration was to a point where there wasn't any amount of injections or exploratory surgery, anything that was going to give him the quality of REM sleep that he needed. So I gave the last gift I could give him was to, I actually donated him to a local university, and they were able to use him as a live cadaver for a joint replacement surgery. And then he was, yeah. And then, so they were able to take him from lameness exam to, flexion and everything. And I remember the professor being, as respectfully excited as he could be over the fact that in all of his years of teaching that particular surgery simulation, they had never really been able to observe a horse that was actually struggling like that with joints. So the people that came into my life to help me learn about all the things I learned about for that horse is 100% why I do what I do. Is that they can't speak for themselves. And it's almost impossible, I think, to know the absolute history of horses, and being able to really read what their bodies are saying and learn as many layers, about as many layers of what goes into them being the horses that they are, I think super important and what I love to share. So I always say that, Schaeffer Bodyworks LLC and all of the things that I do, it's Ollie's legacy. It is my way of being able to help advocate for horses like Ollie that just needed someone to really pay attention and listen to what their bodies were saying. So while it seems like a sad story, he was my heart horse. And I always say, I wish I could have met him sooner so I could have loved him longer and maybe avoided some of those things, gave him a couple more years. But I feel really confident knowing that those 5 years that I had him, I promised him I will try to figure out what is wrong. And if I can't fix it, I'll let you go. And as soon as I did, I knew that I had to let him go. But so since then, I have thrown myself into helping everybody else's horses. And my friend Deb will tell you that I free lease his best friend Freckles at the track facility that he lived at. And I get to still practice all of my stuff on the horses that Ollie lived with before he passed. But that's my favorite experience because it taught me, it was like a 5-year crash course in every possible scenario. I can tell you what massage, kinesiology, taping, cupping, I can tell you what it can and can't do based on what I was able to use those things for him. So that's my favorite.
What an absolute blessing.
Yeah, he really was. He was such a cool horse.
And I'm so glad that you were able to honor everything about him. That's gorgeous.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for
Even
sharing that.
I know, and I haven't been emotional talking about him in a long time, but it's neat. It's neat to, like you talked about how much you love podcasts. And again, it's the opportunities that come into my life for me to be able to share things that may touch and help other people, help horses like Ollie. It's why I do what I do.
And I get chills again. So I think he's saying hi.
I know. I know.
April, what's something that surprised you lately with all that you do?
I mean, honestly, how much more sensitive horses are to really everything than I think we really give them credit to. In my world, touch, they're really sensitive to touch. And I think that it's a huge misconception because they're very big horses that we want to go in and really give it all we got. And people will ask me, what is the hardest thing for me to teach people with massage? And it's getting a feel for how much is too much, because we want to think that they're big and they need it and they'll like it. And some of them do. I mean, in the shoulder and in the butt, there's a lot of horses that'll lean into you, you'll know. But for the most part, what we would consider light touch would be like extra, extra light touch to horses. And the amount of releasing tension that they can do through just that really soft, super light intentional touch is huge. So touch sensitivity is a big one for me professionally. Through kind of my learning about other things, the sensitivity to environment, to nutritional overabundance and deficiencies of things, how sensitive they can be to those things, and people, intention, energies, how sensitive they are. I use the example a lot when I'm at a barn and I'm working with a horse in a hallway. I can usually tell exactly what their relationships are like with different handlers in the barn by just the way that their body language changes when those people walk past. And it's not always negative. It's just different. Like there's a certain person that'll go by and say hi to whatever the horse's name is. And, they'll take a deep breath and they'll relax, or there's another one that's, kind of curious and unsure. And I think that the sensitivity overall for being such large animals kind of speaks volumes to how much we humanize them. We want to think that they're tough like we are, and then they're soft like we are. And 9 times out of 10, they're usually much more hypersensitive to most things than we give them credit for.
Yeah, that leads me to another question. What do you do to set yourself up for success in your own body, mind, spirit before you work with a horse?
So I listen to a lot of acoustic classical music in the car on the way to barns.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah, and it's funny because I'll play like shuffle on my playlist every once in a while in the house, and one of those songs will come on, and my husband's like, "When do you listen to that?" I'm on the way to the barn. I have to clear my mind. So that's a big thing. I guess I'm lucky in the sense that I have anywhere from a 30-minute to a 2-hour drive to most of my physical clients.
Oh, wow.
So it really gives me a lot of time to like get right in my mind and my body. I take fitness very seriously. As I mentioned before, I was pretty involved in competitive fitness before my breast cancer. My scarring from things like that have put a little bit of a damper on how much I can do that. But I do a lot of stretching. Also mentioned being a hairdresser for a long time. So my shoulders and my wrists from both of my jobs being very upper body intense. I do a lot of mobility and stretching in my upper body, but I find that with horses, again, because they're super sensitive to touch, it can be more emotionally taxing than physically taxing if everything's where it should be. Um, I think that I find myself more empathetic, like I take on their tension. I allow myself to be in a space where if they need to let something go, I can take that for them. And that's not so much physical as it is, I think, kind of emotional and energetically. But yeah, and then if I'm making multiple trips in a day, that music comes right back on in the car, and I have to kind of let go of where I just left from and get ready for where I'm going to. I have about a 6 horse max a day. I really try to get as many horses in one particular space as I can so that I don't have to shut those things on and off all day long. But it doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes I have 2 here, 2 here, 2 here. Or, there's some days when it's one, a one straggler in between. But yeah, it's always just kind of shutting that mind down and listening to whatever music I need to that slows all that down for me.
Music is absolutely magical and healing.
Mm,
And
it
I was
really is.
talking to my husband about this the other day when we are walking our dogs, and he said it really helps us get connected to spirit when we sing and when we really allow the music to fill our entire essence. So I'm really
Mm,
glad you do that. Thank you for sharing that.
yeah, you're welcome.
Do you have a transformation story that you'd like to share?
I do. I have a couple of them. I have a couple of them, but I want to talk about one of my most recent. And he is a 10-year-old off the track thoroughbred named Adonis. And his owner will be so excited that he's being talked about on a podcast. I have been his massage therapist now for about 6 or 7 years. I started massaging him right after they acquired him. An elderly woman, I guess, had taken him directly off the track. And when she had passed away, they needed to rehome him. And the current owner, was in her late teens when she acquired him. He was your typical pent up, ribby, crappy thoroughbred feet. All the things. He cribbed, he did all of the things. And I'll never forget his very first massage. He was very, very guarded and protected of his hind end. Typically, horses will give you I say that they'll whisper before they scream. And usually it's a little bit of like a look back or an ear or a side eye before they would ever like lift a leg and offer to kick or reach back to bite. And this poor guy, like his whole hind end was just so uncomfortable, that my intention and thought of going to touch his hind end got a response of a leg lifted to come at me. And I find that as a challenge, not in an unsafe way, but I'm very much so, okay, we're not going to touch your hind end today. We are going to show you how good it feels everywhere else, and we'll work to that next time. So I've literally massaged this horse every month for going on 7 years.
Wow.
And I'm happy to say that he unraveled into this sweet, soft, he has more personality than most horses on my book. He smiles at you because he knows that he'll get a treat if he smiles at you.
Oh, my therapist does that. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, he's just the sweetest. And one of the things that we really struggled with him was getting him in an environment that really allowed all of the pieces to support what his goals were. So he was in dressage training, and they got him pretty comfortable at like level 1. And I was of the feeling that his body was being restricted by his feet. So he was very, low heel, kind of pancaked hoof. I couldn't imagine that the angle of his hoof was really allowing him to get the collection he needed to be able to be further than they had been able to get him. But it was that kind of intimidation factor where there was people on her team that all used the same person, and it was hard. It was hard to make those changes. So in the last year and year-ish, we've been able to completely overhaul nutrition, remove the shoes, and work with a farrier that put like some glue on, some casts on him, and like really gave him the opportunity to grow out some of that old hoof and see what the new hoof wanted to look like when it grew in. Gave him some time off, and happy to report that he's got 3/4 of a brand new hoof capsule that is beautiful, growing out. He can walk across rocks barefoot and has no problem. He's out 99% of the time. So removing as much confinement and restriction as possible from his world made him crib less, which made him less pole sore, which made his whole body happier. And his weight and condition has never looked better. And before they made all those changes, the volume of food that he was getting, his body just wasn't using, because social, emotional stress, like all of the things were just overloading his systems and not allowing him to kind of work his own stuff out. So at least the last 3 massages, I've been able to take his cribbing collar off when I massage him, and he does not try to crib on the cross ties anymore, that sounds crazy, but that is a huge thing for this horse.
Yeah.
I always felt so guilty leaving his cribbing collar on him, but he would crib so much the whole time that I couldn't imagine that he was ever relaxing enough to enjoy what was happening.
Yeah.
But so much of it, that was his way of saying that something was hurting, and that he was uncomfortable. So I love a story that results in a horse really being able to be a horse and find its own comfortable space. And the personality and the partnership that he's able to have with his handlers, with his owner, with other horses, the confidence he has in himself with other horses is just huge. And, I will take credit for helping him feel as good as he can in his body once a month, but the rest of it was all environmental. It was all just making the changes that his body was asking for.
That's absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah.
Oh, and those owners must be so happy that you're able to keep helping.
Yes, he's great. He is currently in the process of potentially finding a new home, but I have been enlisted to be the person who finds where that's at. So that I can continue to see him, and we can make sure that wherever his next home is, it will continue to support him nutritionally and environmentally to keep him going on the direction that he is.
Oh, good. I'm glad you're there to help that.
Yeah, me too. It's exciting.
He sounds like a character.
Yeah, he really is. He's such a funny guy. He's so sweet. And he's not like he I always say he doesn't want to be a show horse. Like, he is just a goofy, slow, like, unless you ask him to really get up and move, he's gonna drag his feet. He's gonna be super slow. Where, sometimes you think of off the track thoroughbred and they're spooky and they're scared of everything and they're, jumping away from their own shadow. Where as long as he is in a really comfortable environment, nothing bothers him. Absolutely nothing bothers him. And he's another one that's super energetically responsive. And one thing that his current owner really was able to, I guess you could say, to work on about herself was she realized that when she was nervous and anxious, he was nervous and anxious. When she was calm, he was calm. And that was something that, depending on the environment they were in, or, what their goals were at the time, they really had to work through a lot of that, because he was so receptive that she might not have even recognized how nervous she was until she realized that he was acting a certain way. And then she had to kind of put herself back where she needed to be for him. So I love those stories.
Oh, I love that. And that's what I teach, is that self-awareness. And that's another reason why I created the meditations for equestrians, so they can get into the state that they want to be in before they even go with the horse. So that's beautiful. So if you could teach a master class to riding instructors, what would the topic be? And what would be some of the key points?
Okay, so I think the topic would be how to recognize soreness. I think a little bit like what we talked about earlier. Sometimes things have become normalized because they're common, not really because they're normal. So for me, it would be making sure that I could help a trainer learn how to palpate common areas for soreness or you know hard muscles where we want them to be supple, or very closed areas where we want them to be more open. Um, Trying to train your eye to what the root cause of whatever symptom we're seeing might be, so that before it becomes like a muscular development issue, we can create an environment that supports the proper muscular development. And I think that is one of the things that I see the most when I'm working with trainers is that we want to kind of fix everything under saddle. And sometimes I don't think it has anything to do with the saddle or the training or the rider. Usually it's just some little piece, whether it be saddle fit, whether it be a slight hoof angle change, whether they just need like a shorter trim cycle, whether there's, one ingredient in their feed that's just giving them a little too much sugar and starch and it's causing some inflammation. There's usually very small fixes that can make really big changes, instead of always thinking that it's something that can be corrected in collection or, corrected under saddle. So yeah, training their eye and training their field just a little bit to find out if I find something reactive at the wither, what does that say? Is it at the wither or is it through the thoracic sling? And is the thoracic sling really the problem, or is the hoof angle not allowing the thoracic sling to open the way that we need it to? If we have lumbar sensitivity, is it really the lumbar, or are we hollowing? Is that lumbosacral joint taking too much tension from a bit of a hollow throughout the back? Or is the lumbar the cause of possible, say, hock or stifle inflammation? I find a lot that reactive lumbars and swollen medial hocks are typically almost always together. And to me, you got to find out why that happens, right? Because it's probably not either area. Those are compensations for whatever's causing that to happen. So that problem solving aspect, I think, is something that not just a body worker should know how to do. We should share those things with other people on our teams to be able to create that supportive environment for horses.
Oh, that'd be super valuable. Is it available now or
Right. Right. But like I said, with pressures, palpation and pressures are probably two of the things that I struggle the most with teaching virtually. I try to do as many in-person hybrid option type of things as I can, but obviously being in the Midwest, not everybody's right here in my backyard. But a lot of times once, they're able to watch me do it or I guide over their hand in person, they pick it up right away. But it's something that's very hard to do virtually. So I don't know, maybe I'll try to play around with some videos of teaching it kind of from more of a trainer perspective. And my friend Deanna Price, I'm sure, would be happy to help me create something like that.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
And then I'm also wondering, have you ever done like remote lessons with people, guiding them to do the movements?
I haven't. I've thought about doing that a little bit. So my professional classes, I have a full online option and then I have like a hybrid option. And the hybrid option basically takes their final certifications and has them come do them in person with me for 2 days once they've finished the rest of their requirements. And I've thought often about how I could do that remotely, like how I could create something like that to give that hybrid option to an online student that might be on the other side of the country or in another country and still be able to help guide them through that feel. I would probably need to find myself a guinea pig to see how it would work.
I will do it.
Yeah. Okay.
I was just thinking I could help you
Yeah.
with the testing and all that. So
Yeah, it would be fun. I would just have to make sure that the problem with the track system that I spend all my time at is that it's enough of a Wi-Fi signal to get service. I'm just not really sure it would be enough of a Wi-Fi signal to get like full on streaming, signal service. So I
Right.
think I would probably have to go somewhere like Deanna's or somewhere where I know they have a
But
better
if,
signal.
but let's say, like I'm out there with Pepper and you can just be right
Mhm.
here. You can just guide me, like talk me through,
Yeah,
things, you know,
for sure. For
like that would
sure.
be,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It would be fun to try.
I'm already thinking ahead. Like, let's get more collaborations going. So,
Yeah,
I love
absolutely.
it. But no pressure. It doesn't have to be me,
No,
but I'm just saying that would be super fun.
no, I would love to.
Cool. Okay, let's see. Is there anything that you want to add that I haven't asked you?
No, I don't think so. I mean, really just to reiterate, like never be afraid to speak up. There's no stupid questions. There's only questions you didn't ask. And I think that even if you don't get the answer you're looking for, you're at least going to get some sort of value from asking a question. And I think that that's really important. I think be less afraid of the answer you're going to get and more excited about the value you'll take away. Horses depend on us to never stop learning. Because I love the example of myself as a 9-year-old. If I was still trying to horse the way I was taught to horse as a 9-year-old, I would have a lot of really broken horses at 45. So everything changes, everything evolves. Same way as and the shift that I think I feel and see with horses is that it's a shift in humans. We're understanding differently how impactful our environment is. The stressors that we have in our life are absolutely going to affect us emotionally, socially, and physically. So I think as long as we can keep those things in mind, while horses aren't people, those things still do matter just as much for them as they do us. The environment they require to be safe in those things are just a little bit different than ours.
Beautiful. So, April, if you could create a billboard for the whole horse world to see, what would it say?
It would say, horses are simple and humans are complex. That's what it would say. It would hopefully send the message that horse problems are usually human problems. They're results of human problems. Not that horses can't get themselves in enough trouble on their own, but when we limit their ability to kind of exercise their hardwired senses and needs in an environment that supports that, I think that's where a lot of that comes from. I think we need to normalize species appropriate care. And then I think we'll see a lot fewer horse problems, really. I think the partnership that we would have with our horses, if we allowed them to live simply instead of adding the complexities of our conveniences, I think we'd have less vet bills. I think we'd have longevity and performance. And I think that we'd have fewer human injuries because, it rolls up into a safety issue too. So I think horses are simple, humans are complex.
I love that. Totally agree.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Well, April, this has been wonderful. How can people get a hold of you? And do you have anything you want to share about your business, any specials or anything?
Okay, so I am currently running kind of a flash 50% spring sale on all of the $50 classes in the online library. So that is basically going to get any of the $50 classes for $25. The $50 classes are more the wellness specific classes. So it's going to be hoof and body, compensation patterns, intro to track living, equine anatomy, just to name a few. There's quite a few of them in there. But Flash 50 at my classroom, my Thinkific online classroom, which you will have a link to in the show notes.
Yes.
If you are in the Midwest area, St. Louis Metro, Southern Illinois area, I am currently looking for a few people to fill some holes in my physical business. And I can be contacted at schaefferbodyworks@gmail.com. I have Facebook and Instagram are the two that I'm probably the most active on. You can message me through either of those. Facebook is Schaeffer Bodyworks LLC and Instagram is Schaeffer_Bodyworks. And I'm in the process of having a really cool new website made. The old one is still currently up, so schaefferbodyworks.com. You can find some details and information about me there. We're just trying to streamline all the branding and do all of that stuff with a new site here in the next month or two.
That's exciting. And I'll have all those links in the show notes for everyone. So do reach out to April, and I really hope you take advantage of that. When does that code expire? Just so we have that.
So I have it put in there for a certain amount of them, so it's there till it's gone.
Okay.
There's still quite there's still quite a few left. I'm hoping to I would like to get through all of them before like the 1st of June, because then I want to run like a different special on a different set of classes for summer.
Got it. Okay, so that's before the 1st of June 2025, if you're listening.
Yep.
So I just wanted to reiterate that. And
Sure.
April, this has been wonderful. I loved hearing your stories. I'm so grateful that you're here, you're healthy, you're helping humans and horses, and I'm just so grateful for that. And thank you
so much. I'm blessed. I'm blessed. It's a very lucky thing to be able to be surrounded by, you know, passionate horse people and horses all the time. I always say I'm not sure how I got so lucky, but I'm glad I did.
You have a big heart and it shows. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me, Beth.
You're welcome. Well, everyone, thanks again. Please check the show notes, check out April and all that she has to offer. Thank you so much for listening. And if you're inspired, please do create a review, like and subscribe on YouTube, and remember to lead with kindness for yourself and for your horse. And may the horse be with you always. Thanks, April.
Bye.